Hello there. Welcome back to Shits and Giggles, where we stand on the phrasage, if Grandma had balls, she'd be Grandpa. And if Woody Woodpecker had balls, he'd be in trouble. Let us suppose that the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president and wife, the war in Israel, the genocide in Israel, the war in Ukraine, all legitimate events in their own right, but all part of, I'll use John Titus's coinage, the war for bankocracy. I was just reading the opening of Eustace Mullins' The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, and it's very interesting how in the United States of America, where we do have Article 1, I think was it Article 158? Article 1, Section 8, where we just declare our right to coin our own money, that there was much pushback right out of the gate from Thomas Jefferson for the corporatization of banking. Never mind the step we went further to give corporate banks the rights of persons, and then what we went on to Citizens United, blah, 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 blah. But he talks about how global banking interests got together, the monetary reform, and they got together to write it, to create the Federal Reserve Act. And we forget that there was a time where every state in the United States had their own money, and that the Federal Reserve Act and the monetary reform was to consolidate one national currency. So, it's very telling where we are today. To say that the global public-private partnership with the Bank of International Settlements at the head, it's very clear that in the foundation of Israel, the Rothschild banking dynasty was behind it from the beginning. The Bank of International Settlements, the first congressional meeting of Israel was in Basel, Switzerland, which was the home of the Bank of International Settlements. It's very clear that the Balfour Declaration was written, 2 letters written from Lord Rothschild to Lord Balfour and back, in which they decided to give a foreign land to another people. So, in looking at the merger of the EU, where we are today in this push towards a North American alliance, even seeking to pull Greenland into it, I'll put up a chart of the technate, which I was suggesting in another supposition, that could be a good template for us to understand how a new type of technological governance system can be implemented from the course study book of Technocracy, Inc. And the word billions. Think of one day the word billions just had become normalized. Excuse me. Think about the time when direct deposit became normalized. Far before that, and now billions. Why that's important to understand is the global digital currency has already been created. And then if we could suggest that John Titus is over the mark with the coinage, the war for bankocracy, and that the central banks are making a play on the world and may have been since the beginning of the central banks, then we could suggest that Ukraine, Israel, and what's going on right now in South America. Well, let's just say Israel, sending them billions of dollars, not only has created a type of base in the world, but it's created and it looks like the projections of the Gaza will be a type of smart city with a new smart city infrastructure. But billions of dollars have been established, and we weren't sending billions to Israel on pallets of cash, that we were sending digital money. So an economy, and every transaction, all of the military industrial exchanges, public-private partnerships, have been dealing in digital money. All of the money to the Ukraine, digital. Same thing with the Ukraine. There's all of the destruction. Well, my suggestion is it'll be another hub of this technocratic hub in which not only will we be putting in an infrastructure of smart cities as hubs of control or types of military bases, right? But maybe technological military bases with smart cities and smart surveillance technologies like we're establishing on the border, right? But they have already established a new type of monetary system in the billions of digital money. So from the beginning of the Ukraine war, since we've been sending money to Israel in the billions, we have been establishing not only the use, now the new type of power differential established with the acceptance of a billion-dollar economy, where billions is the money being played with. Because it's very hard for anybody who is not now in this new technocratic system, for an independent to ever compete with the billions. You know, like someone in the past where someone could go into be an entrepreneur and make millions and be some type of, be able to compete in the system that's far gone. So we need to put on the table that it's very clear. Well, here's another aspect of how, even in the United States of America, it's been, at every turn, the law has been construed against we the people's inalienable rights. I'm an American, I'm in the United States of America. And I would say, and now the cry, and this is a public relations maneuver, they're masters of this, is this new push towards anti-Semitism laws. But I will suggest to you, it's creating a fight, a dialectic, in which people can get into a fight regarding anti-Semitism and Semitism. But what I'll tell you is that Israel is only a front. Israel is the Dougies, right? The Dougies of the British East India Company. If you're unaware, the Dougies were the British East India Company, when they were subjugating India, had organized opium addicts to disrupt and terrorize the locals who would fight against the subjugators of Britain. And they would do it, any of the locals who were established enough and could stand up against the subjugation were disrupted covertly and terrorized by the Dougies. That's where we get the term thug from in America. So Israel has been created as a type of legitimized nation of Dougies. And if we understand the Federal Reserve, the structure of the Federal Reserve, the people behind it, the Federal Reserve is run by independent banks. But behind those banks are people. And the reason why they had the Federal Reserve Act is because we had to sign over our coining rights to privateers or private industry. Right? So every step of the way, that's why I think it's very important to read The Secrets of the Federal Reserve from Eustace Mullins. Even in the opening, it's very clear that every war has been beneficial to this type of globalization of the economic structure by the central banks. Without a doubt. So we really need to put on the table and take into consideration that the whole economic system has been heavily leveraged against we the people. And even now the people who are benefiting from our current regime, as people are calling it, even Trump is not a leader. Well, he may be a leader of the thuggies, but he's not the guy calling the shots behind the Bank of International Settlements. And we really need to put into perspective who we are into relationship with the economy. Because I understand it. I'm from a background where it was very important to, people had to know, if someone wanted to get into a union or get into a business, you had to really know someone to try to, get someone in the door, as they say. I don't knock those people. It's just the way the system was set up. But the honest appraisal is, it seems the United States of America, the working class people, to put it in a metaphor, have to accept that for 100 years we've been walking in the wrong direction. And we've stopped and said, we're going to have to turn around. Because that's where we are. Well, at least if we stand on the principles of freedom, if we really want to accept that we find these truths self-evident, all men are created equal, endowed with certain inalienable rights by the Creator, understanding the separation of church and state, that the United States of America was, even if just by espoused word, intended to be a land of the free. So we have never reconciled the fact that even though we declared our independence and created a constitution that was supposed to protect the inalienable rights of every human being and the checks and balance government to keep people's power in check, we never reconciled that we continued to use, or we allowed the economic system of the crown, the monarchy, and the international bankers come in and overtake our country. And the truth is, we may not have done it right from the beginning, but the natural law principles of inalienable rights, that which we call inalienable rights, stand. So they have gone so far in this global coup d'etat, and it's very clear that it's, even just to look at briefly at Eustace Mullins' The Secret of the Federal Reserve, very clear that the intent was this global takeover of central banks. And that our economy, a debt-based economy, is unnecessary. And in fact, I would even state that the banker's clock is not necessary in an economy which relies on exchange of value. Maybe a huge jump, But that is really the actual state. And they have stated, some people, if you're unaware, the World Economics statement of calling out the Great Reset and the Fourth Industrial Revolution is very clear that they have already reset the playing field. So perhaps we should not let them run the game, at least not on We the People. But many are so captured by the system, cognitively, totally dependent on the system, that they're going to go along with it. But let us not let them define the narrative, because that's one of the problems. They're so good at rhetoric that they control the narrative. Even the word civil war should not stand, because the Civil War implies that there were two parties of a country, two parts of a nation that are in a disagreement and they are going to war. No. We have been under attack covertly and now explicitly and implicitly, right? Covertly and explicitly, overtly, an attack on We the People. And what has happened is the robbing of our country and the manipulations of our economic system through finance and different types of ways of creating bubbles, right? We have an economic system that simply can't sustain itself. Simply what it is. And it may be, even before that, colonialism and the debt-based central bank system needs to conquer new lands to establish new economies in order to run the game. This is what's happening in Israel. But what we need to understand in the United States of America is, as Klaus Schwab said from the World Economic Forum, the United States of America will no longer be a superpower. That we will be brought under the fold of the global economic governance system being established with the Fourth Industrial Revolution, excuse me, and a Great Reset. But as I said before, even that is part of their propaganda, because it's more that the United States of America will no longer be the pillar of freedom, standing on the principles of inalienable rights, or the principle of inalienable rights. So, the whole anti-Semitism movement is a type of ruse. I mean, they use public relations as a weapon, and on many fronts. One, the attack on the people, on the foundational principles of the country, by saying that they could take away an individual's inalienable rights for a possible threat, is a total trespass upon basic principles of the country. And to construe our law against the basic principles of inalienable rights is an attack on the country, the foundation of the country. An attack far worse than the attack on the Twin Towers. And in fact, the same people behind the attack on the Twin Towers are the same people construing our government and our law against the inalienable rights of the people. Because you can attack the Twin Towers and kill 3,000 people, but you could never alter the Constitution. But using such an event, you can manipulate people's emotions, use rhetoric, and construe the law against the inalienable rights by such things as the Patriot Act. So the suggestion is anytime we see a war or disaster event, let's give pause that although an actual event is actual, that it may be the global wielding of global blank bankers and power players that have the power of putting nations into motion, into war. And that we really need to understand that the way one makes a living, gets a direct deposit salary and pension, is connected to the central bank system and this genocide machine, without a doubt. And know this, you cannot call out the deep state and not understand the deep state is Homeland Security, that the deep state is the Patriot Act. Right? It is all part of it. You cannot separate it. Donald Trump is the deep state. So, for shits and giggles, let us say that John Titus is right, and the term the war for bankocracy is more to the root of what's happening, and that the Israel-Gaza Hamas war may be actual, but a type of created event, a flank, right? Or a false flag type of thing, where they create an actual situation, but the intent is other than what is at play. It is definitely real for the people in the Gaza. It is certainly real for people that are behind Zionism. But think of the manipulation of the masters of this game, that they could set a nation of people into motion for 100 years and actually capture their minds into a belief system as they sit back and play global geopolitics. Because this is what is at hand. Well, for shits and giggles, for a laugh, let's suppose it is. Okay, take care.